Welcome to the Stoned Heen View, a podcast series which interviews a range of sport club representatives and leading professional sport club personnel during the COVID-19 period. We find out what these people are doing during the current health crisis with some of our most popular sports seasons postponed. I'm Mark Heenan, and I'm the host of the program of the Stoned Heen View podcast, and we've reached a little bit of a milestone figure, episode 60, and this person that we're going to interview today, I regard in a few different areas. He's actually been a little bit of my footy coach, even though I wasn't much of a player. I've also been a reporter when he's been the coach, and I still regard him as a bit of a mate. And obviously, our paths hasn't really crossed as much as what they used to. But at the same time, too, he's making it in the local footy coaching world, and he's had a lot of challenges around COVID. And we welcome to the Stoned Heen View for episode 60 for the podcast, Bell Park Senior Football Club coach Shane Jack. Welcome, Shane Jack, to the podcast for the Stoned Heen View.
Thanks, Hina. Yeah, I was just thinking back when you got in contact with me. I was thinking back how long we have known each other, and it has been a fair while now since I was down Ocean Grove days, and obviously we've been in contact ever since. So it's probably been that 9 to 10 year mark now that we have known each other. So yeah, it would be good to have a chat, bud.
Oh no, thanks for allowing me to have a chat to you and just talking about what's going on. And obviously there are many facets to you. You know, like I've got quite a few notes here about what we can talk about, but I see you as a bit of a mate, a bit of a football coach. In some ways, I think maybe I helped Shane Jack train himself for media training all those years ago when you got into coaching. But because I was used to pulling you out of the the speeches after the game and having a chat for the newspaper. So, you've come a long way in that sense, because, I mean, a lot of the success that you've had has been also with the coaching, post sort of Heath Jamison at St. Joseph's. So you're involved with, obviously, David King there. And now you're at Bell Park. And obviously, you've got a unique set of challenges as a football club coach that you're running up against COVID. And I suppose, where we land at the moment with COVID is that you didn't coach on the weekend because we went into a lockdown 4.0. So whilst we'll talk about last year, did it have a bit of an unusual feel to last weekend, the fact that you couldn't coach after many rounds of this season going ahead?
Yeah, it did, mate. I think we just had that long period where there wasn't any cases, and I think we're just getting back to a bit of normality. And then out of the blue, like as we know with this, it can just come up. It changes things pretty quickly. So, I mean, we trained last week. We had one training session before we went to lockdown, and now it's just pretty much a wait and see game. Obviously, we didn't play on the weekend. It all comes pretty quickly, but you just got to adapt in these times. Footy plays a pretty minute part in everything that's happening, but we just try to adapt to change as quick as possible.
And obviously with that, I mean, I had to sort of push the button with you last week in terms of getting a photo organised for this podcast, because it's a video podcast and an audio podcast. And we've also got the business edition out there as well. So we want to talk to businesses a little bit during COVID and how they're coping and leading them sort of talk about their story during COVID. But yeah, we had to get in quick because like last week you had that training session, and I don't know what the contact's been with the players, but obviously, from a local football point of view is that, obviously by the time we release this, that local football competitions will be obviously cut to 16 round seasons, because they're hoping that they'll resume this season and that the prospect of junior football by the time this comes out will go ahead this weekend. But we're waiting to find out some more information from the local governance in terms of, football in terms of AFL Barwon in this region. So how do your players react to that, and what's your contact with your players about that?
Yeah, look, like most coaches, I think, mate, we have a WhatsApp group which I communicate most of our stuff through. So like I said, we trained last week. Leading into lockdown, I talked to our fitness coach. He's put out a bit of a fitness program for this week. Once again, we'll have to work out something to do over the weekend. And then hopefully, as of tomorrow, we'll know more about our training and how many numbers we can get at training and stuff like that. So it's a little different, but I think the players have adapted to that. They had all of last year where everything was changing, and obviously we didn't get a season in. But earlier in that preseason, we did some training. We stopped, and then we got back into it again. So they're used to that now. And like I've said to them, we've just got to go with the change and just be ready to go. If AFL Barwon turn around and say we're playing next weekend, we just got to be prepared as best best we can.
And it's an interesting point of the season because you're 4-2 and you had some close wins, including that win against Leopold. I mean, I've heard you in some interviews talk about how important the wins are at the start of the season, but with a shortened season with a couple of rounds off, those close wins mean a hell of a lot in the context of the season, don't they?
Yeah, now looking at that, they probably do, mate. If they're talking obviously about going to a 16-round season, and look, we've won our last 4 games, which is good. I touched on we played against Grovedale round 1, and they got hold of us by I think 4 goals in the end. But they played some good footy, and I think their form's starting to stack up a bit. And then we played a strong Colac side in round 2, and they look really fit and strong. And they had a Darcy Lang return that weekend from VFL, and I just thought we had a lot of new players and a lot of younger players, so I thought it might take a bit of time. But we've started to play some good brand of footy, especially the last 4 weeks. We had a good win against Leopold when we had 2 of our leaders go down and starting to show some form. In saying that, we did have some injuries, so this couple of weeks might actually help us where we get to roll some guys back, hopefully the following week.
Let's just highlight some of those players. I mean, I don't get to watch GFL like I used to because I've been reporting on the Bellarine for some period. And obviously, you know, the few names that come to mind when I think of Bell Park, you know, Sheringham and Benstead. How do the older players, whether it's like a Sheringham, but are they playing like it's their last, like they're playing like every game's their last and they're just putting on their body on the line? Or, I mean, how do those older players go at Bell Park senior level, knowing that, hey, at any stage this season could be shortened?
I think like a lot of guys who have played a lot of footy, once you get to your older age, you know your body. So they have a lot, especially the 2 Sheringhams and Christian Bookerbars and these guys, they know their own body and they know their training capabilities and stuff like that. So that as long as they can get up and perform on game day, I'm more than happy for them to do what they think is needed during the week to look after their body and also feel refreshed. There's nothing like just rocking up to training and then playing, then back to training. So that as long as they're doing and they think their body's right to go on a Saturday, let them freshen up and do what they want during the week. They know their bodies by that time of their career and what will get them up.
Now, we want to obviously delve into the COVID situation in terms of what was sort of said last year and how you went about it. And you had mentioned last year, you know, we didn't have a season. There was talk that, you know, if they did have a season, it would be a shortened season, and how you justify someone maybe that's a plumber or an electrician or whatever working as opposed to playing football on a Saturday and knowing that would be the case. I mean, you mentioned last year about they had restrictions in state, and I've even discussed this with one particular club at the moment about, if you played this weekend, right, how would you go playing? Because at the end of the day, you're not going to have a training block, even though you might have one on Friday in that sense. So you mentioned last year about having a bit of a mini training block being advantageous for players not to go into the game cold. I mean, can you just sort of explain a bit about that?
With that COVID period, we got back into a training block, and I think the question got asked me, how long do I think we need before we can actually play a game? And because we had so long off, like this is probably a bit different at the moment. We've only had that week off, so I'm of the view that I think our players will be able to play just with the Friday session. They've just had a week of freshening up, but back then we had such a long period off. I just thought we needed to have the 3 or 4 weeks of full training, some match simulation, just to come into that first round. I just don't think you can just pull the trigger and just say, listen, we're playing in 1 week, especially after not doing a lot of work. I know they were doing a lot of fitness-based stuff, but it's just completely different when you're out there kicking and bumping bodies and stuff like that. So I just think that came up in the past, and I just said I think we need a 3 or 4 week block that we actually out there competing against each other and just getting used to footy again before we can jump back into round 1.
What was the mood, particularly in the second half of last year, sort of once that decision had been made at Bell Park? I mean, in a lot of ways, we probably had an extended training block as you got into pre-season, knowing that, you know, that was it. They made the call 1 year ago. We're not going ahead with the season. 2020 has been ruled in the line. I mean, did you find, and I know I'll probably ask this a little bit because it's about, this podcast is about how sports people, sports clubs attack the COVID, local sports clubs and sports people and in many facets, how they deal with the COVID. I mean, obviously you would have run your Zoom sessions last year and having those little incentives and you know, maybe going on a virtual bike ride or those sorts of things. But in the second half of last year, in the lead up to pre-season, I mean, was it hard to get the players motivated, and what activities did you do that involved that sort of virtual contact rather than, meeting in person?
Coming into this year, was into this preseason, was a bit of a concern. I just had a concern that after the players had a year off, whether they actually missed playing footy, which we had a few. Obviously, as head coach, I had to call up every player on our list. So I called up every player and asked them about, obviously if they wanted to go around again and how their life has been during the COVID period. We were in a bit of a situation at Bell Park where we did have a lot of country boys come down. And during that COVID time, obviously with no uni and not much work down here, they all went back home. So that was another thing that we had to try and adapt to and had the open conversation. So I think we probably had 4 or 5 in the end that decided to stay back at home. So the recruiting process this year is probably a bit more than it has been in the past, just because, and you can totally understand, they've gone back to their families and they've decided that not that they feel safer there, but they've probably got more security back at home and stuff like that. So it was an interesting one leading into this preseason, because we did have some guys who have played footy since they're 9 or 10 years old and just realised after not playing all season that maybe that there is other stuff. There's work, there's whatever, surfing, there's just relaxing on a Saturday. Doesn't always have to be footy. So that was a hard thing, especially in the preseason. But I'm just starting to find now, pretty much since the season started, I've had some phone calls from guys saying, listen, now the footy's back playing, we actually miss it. Can we come down and train and look getting back to playing? I think we've had 3 or 4 now over the last 4 or 5 weeks that have just called me up and asked to come down and start training again. So I was starting early in the preseason, I was a bit worried, but now we've had some guys starting to turn the circle, and now that they want to get back involved. Obviously, they're missing their footy and just missing being around their mates and being involved in the footy club, I think.
What about your top end talent last year? And what I mean, this question, I refer to, I've known players, and we had one on our podcast, and you know him from the region, Harry Walker. He went up to New South Wales and started playing it into the North Shore Bombers. But also there were players that have gone into Northern Territory. There's players that have gone into South Australia. I'm talking about last year. Were there players that, particularly your top end talent, and thought, hey, look, yes, I'm missing football, but I also want to test myself. This is an opportunity to go into state, maybe take my career. I can take my job, whether it's, it could be a financial broker, I don't know, take it on the road, right? And go out. Did you have any players that fell into that category last year? They knew that the GFL was called off, the Geelong Football League was called off. I'm going to go into state and test myself, because there were a few from the GFL that did that.
Yeah, there was. No, there wasn't any from Bell Park, not that I can think of. We at the moment we have 7 VFL guys with us this year, but they're all committed to Geelong and Werribee, so they didn't actually travel interstate or anything like that. So we're pretty fortunate where they all stayed around the region. We had no one really go interstate or anything like that. So
we've had a few people on this podcast from Werribee. We've had Michael Barlow and Mark Penaluna, and you're a good Werribee man as well. You were telling me the other day that incidentally, I should know this because I'm involved here, but you used to go to school in Werribee, and that's part of my other job. But you also involved at the Werribee Tigers VFL affiliate before you. That was one of the high points of your playing career. And didn't you do a men's season calendar or something like that, pushing some dumbbells?
That was a long time ago, mate. Yeah, I grew up in Werribee, so I was down at Werribee VFL, I think, for 8 or 9 years. So we come down Geelong when I was when I was probably 25 or 26. So some really good times at Werribee. Made some really good mates, and still close mates with a lot of them now. So obviously come down this way, and then obviously left Werribee and went to play at Geelong West down in the GFL for another 7 or 8 years before I went to Ocean Groves.
I can pass on my former co-host's details because he's a recruiter at Werribee in Mark Stone. Right. So I know that you've got some good contacts at Werribee, so I'm sure you're all across it. But if you need any more top end talent from Werribee, he's the man you got to call, Stoney. Have you found that there's been a bit more of a crossover with Bell Park as opposed to those 2 other clubs that you've been involved from a coaching point of view with Werribee? Yeah,
definitely now as senior coach. Obviously, I was involved with Heath Jamison at Joey's, and we had a lot of VFL guys there. But obviously, being the senior coach at Bell Park, you're in contact directly with Nathan Tweedle, who's at Geelong. I think we've got 5 guys down there, and we've got 2 guys down at Werribee. So by the name of Luke Gallagher, I deal with there, and they've both been great. We give constant feedback. I'd talk to them probably once a week about how the boys are going down there, or if they're with us, they obviously want to know how they're going with us. So it's good open communication with both clubs, and they do a great job.
I know that researching your interviews, particularly in recent times, you've mentioned how you've had a lot of contact with Nathan Tweedle. Is that a good dilemma to have, particularly particularly when you have to select players from VFL level, like, you know, on a Thursday or Friday, thinking, oh, hey, this is going to be the team for the weekend. And then all of a sudden it gets sort of flipped on the head, because you're saying you've got about 6 or 7 players that potentially are at VFL level that could come into Bell Park calculations if they're available.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing, mate. Obviously, they're in the VFL system, and I always say that I want our players to play as high as they can. So they're really some top end talent. I mean, the kids that we've got in the VFL are guys that have played TAC Cup at a high level. A lot of them have moved to Geelong, and they still want to play at the highest level of footy they can. And we're just glad that they choose Bell Park as their affiliate club. So we try to make it as accommodating as possible for them, but we want them to play the highest footy that they can. That's at Geelong or Werribee, and if they do miss out, they come back and play some good footy with us. But we've got a great bunch of boys down there at the moment, and they've really fit into the club.
And obviously we did have a cricket season, particularly at Hamlin Park, from the end of, you know, no football season last season. But, you know, I got to see the surface last week, and you know, it seemed like it held up really well going into winter. Now we're in the June period as well now. So how did you feel from a facility point of view, the operation at Bell Park, not just, you know, the club rooms, but also the surface as well, had started for you at the start of the year? Were you pretty happy coming back post-COVID, but shut down of last year?
Yeah, look, it's held up really well. I didn't have any footy on it the last season, so we're lucky enough to have the back oval as well for our pre-season. So both ovals are in pretty good nick. They're probably a tad hard. They're pretty firm at the moment, but hopefully coming into this winter, that will sponge up a bit and just gives the boys a bit of relief on their legs. But yeah, both grounds are held up really well. Obviously, we're on the main oval now under lights with our new lights, and we still have some junior teams on the back oval. They train early enough, they get on there. So.
And how did you adapt to those restrictions during the last pre-season?
It was pretty tough, mate. Obviously, it changed a fair bit, but we're in different groups and different times, and we have to do check-in and check-out and stuff like that. But like every club around the region, mate, you just had to do it and just had to adapt to it and just make sure you stick by the rules. Obviously, the safety of the players and officials and everyone like that is paramount. So we just made sure we did everything correct. It was a bit different for everyone involved, but you do what you got to do.
Hey, one of the great things that I remember about you when you started your coaching career, well, at a senior level, and I want to use these words, is that I hear it a lot, and I hear people say, oh, this saying, lowering their eyes. And you know what? When I hear that saying, I think of you, because I remember when you were coaching on the Ballerine that you used that term. You might have used things like quick footy or lowering their eyes. When you got into coaching, I don't know if you use that in your talks or if it's a philosophy that you have when you're doing your huddle speeches when you're coaching now. But when you got into coaching, was that something that you reinforced a lot? And is that something that you heard from someone else, or how did you develop that sort of lowering their eyes?
Yeah, look, I think it's just got to do with obviously the coaches that have probably coached me in the past. Each year on year, you play like I can't remember how many coaches I've had, but you probably take snippets of from each coach about what you think will help you and your team. So, I mean, down at Ocean Grove, I had Cam McGregor I started there as assistant, and Cam McGregor was the coach, so I took a little bit from him. I had a good coach, Geelong West, in Chris Gillum, who's a good mate, but also had some real AFL. I had Alistair Clarkson and Chris Bond and Donna McDonough and Simon Atkins and these guys up at Werribee. So you just tried to take little snippets, but then you just got to try and look at the team you got and just try and work in, obviously, what best works for the team. So every team's a bit different. There's not one philosophy that I stick with. Obviously, if I was at Ocean Grove and then went to Joey's and then went to Bell Park, they're all different philosophy. You just got to adapt to the team that you've got. So
that was one hell of a setup. I mean, you're actually the last person to take Ocean Grove to a grand final in 2014, and don't forget that, because that was also a year that I played my last 5 games of footy as well, under you as well. But
yeah.
but the point, and I actually remember calling you up and thinking, you're going to think this is weird. We're actually going to play, because there were games where you might have been coming back from an injury, and then I got to actually share playing in your team. And then at 3/4 time, you would have to leave to get ready to coach. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if you remember this, but like when you went and you finished at Ocean Grove and then you went into the GFL, I mean, I just thought to myself, Heath Jamison, David King, Shane Jack. It was one hell of a coaching setup, wasn't it? I was just thinking if the coaching payroll was the payroll would have been blown up, because that was the quality of the coaches that you had. But I know you love your footy, and I don't know how you survived last year with no local footy. But what about yourself? Like, did you feel that the Joey's stage of your coaching was not just an important stepping stone to go to Bell Park, but how important was that phase of having the success to go to Bell Park and have that desire to coach a GFL club?
It come really out of nowhere for Joey's. I moved into the area just around the corner, and I've been good mates with Paul Carson for a long time. We grew up at Werribee together. He was playing at Joey's, and he actually reached out. I didn't know Heath Jamison at all. We knew of each other, obviously, when he was at Queenscliff. I was at Ocean Grove, but I never actually met him before. And then Carson just rang up. He goes, "Oh, look, are you looking to get back involved at all?" And I said, "Oh, listen, I stepped away from coaching. It was all getting a bit too much, but I've moved in around the corner." He goes, "Oh, maybe would be interested in coming down having a chat to Heath Jamison, just about maybe doing a line coach or an assistant coach or being senior assistant or something like that." So went down, had a chat with Heath, and pretty much straight away we got along really well. We a lot of the same philosophies in life and football and stuff like that. So it all went from there, and obviously it was a great time. Obviously, we had a lot of success when I was there with Heath, and made some really good mates. And it got to the end of Joey's, and I probably had to make a decision about if I wanted to try and go the head coach at Joey's, or Bell Park approached me about coming to sit down with them and having a chat about if I wanted to come and coach Bell Park. So bit of a decision to make. So instead of going through the process with St. Joey's, I met with Bell Park, and they pretty much offered me the job the next day. So that was a decision I make, and it's all going well.
Oh, well, that's really good. And obviously, when you stepped into your footy journey, you've had, playing football for such a period of time. Did you think, 20 years ago that, did you have any involvement with junior coaching, or was it something that you aspired to be? Like, do you think in the last 20 years, going back to the early 2000s or the late 90s, that you would go into a coaching phase? Did that appeal to you back then?
No, not that I can remember, mate. I played obviously a lot of junior footy. I didn't probably start taking. I was a bit of a keen basketballer in my younger days, so I didn't really start taking me footy too serious. Probably till my late teens. But no, it never really, never really stuck out that I'd get into coaching. I mean, I like playing the best footy that I can. I tried to play the highest footy that I can. One thing that probably did stick out, and what my parents are, I really had a good relationship with a lot of the players that I played with, a lot of the coaches that I was coached by. So, but I never really thought I'd coach one day. And then the position came up where Liam Rock and Ben Ricardo were at Geelong West, and they were probably looking to go back to Ocean Grove, and they said, "Oh, why don't you come down and be a playing assistant coach down there?" And that's where I really just I thought, okay, I'll give it a go, and went down there and did that for 2 years, and then obviously took over as coach. And so the assistant coach under Cam McGregor probably opened my eyes a fair bit, and that's where it all just come from then. And as you probably know, I'm a players coach. I stick very fat to me players and very loyal to me players, and as long as they're doing the right thing and loyal to me, I'll back them to the hill. And I'd like to think I've got a good relationship with a lot of the blokes that I have coached over the last 10 years. So.
Well, I'll tell you this much, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the podcast, but out of all the coaches that I've had to deal with at Ocean Grove, you're definitely the bloke that I would call like a mate's mate in that sense, but no, in a good way. Like because I think the reason I was saying that is that most of the coaches, because you were a playing coach then a non-playing coach, and I guess in some ways, I don't know whether that model always works now, but you see it because in some instances there might be a playing coach and then a non-playing coach. So how does your support work for you? Not just with your assistants with Bell Park now, but how does that sort of work in terms of leadership on the field? Because I think one thing that you did when you were at Ocean Grove is that you actually brought in a lot of whether it was the Liam Rocks, you actually brought in sort of coaches on the field. That's what I felt.
Yep.
Is that something that you've developed at Bell Park, and how does that sort of the other coach? How does the coaching system work at Bell Park?
At Ocean Grove, I think I did that because I just thought we needed some leadership out on the ground. So I think we had Rowan O'Callaghan, he was one of the coaches. Mark Ladle was one of the coaches, and obviously we had Liam Rock. And we got some really good experience down there, and Kelly Williams. So they were really good guys to have on the ground. At Bell Park at the moment, I just have off-field coaches with me. So just like generally every other club, but definitely 4 on-field coaches. I remember at Joey's we had Daniel Lovey, Brett Jackman, and these guys. So and I think they obviously see the game a bit differently than we see it up in the box. So I think it's always good to have guys on the ground who you can rely on. And I mean, I've still got that at Bell. Like we've still got the 2 Sheringhams. I'll lean on Lockie Patton and Jackson Bright, our 2 captains, a fair bit, and also Stevie Benstead and Benny Lloyd, our 2
who you would have known from Drysdale, Steve Benstead. So did that come into your calculation in recruiting guys from BFL, knowing that you'd had coaching at BFL, knowing that you could pick players from other clubs or see their talent blossom even when you're coaching at BFL?
It is different footy, BFL and GFL, but if there's a guy down there who's playing some really good BFL football who is fair dinkum about their football, I still believe they can come into the GFL and make an impact. We just had Jeremy Ollis come into us 2 years ago from Mottawarri, and he was a 26, 27-year-old, but he came in and played some really good footy. So I still think BFL footy, the good players who want to take their footy serious, can definitely come in and still make a big impact at GFL footy.
Good stuff. Well, we're going to wrap up. Obviously, you wanted to mention too that your role, like a young family man, and I know when you were down at Ocean Grove, that was always a challenge because you had a young family as well. But at the moment, you're working as a civil administrator in construction. That role's had an impact during COVID. I mean, what were the other things that you got to do like last year outside of footy? How did you spend your time a lot on the weekends outside of footy because there's no footy season on? And how's it impacted with your work this year?
Yeah, look, I've been pretty fortunate throughout the whole time I've been involved in construction. That's always been open, but I know it has been hard. And for my wife as well, especially last year, she was homeschooling our 2 kids who are 9 and 11 now, and she was obviously trying to work from home as well. So it's definitely been hard. But I've been fortunate enough to work for our family. But my wife has done a remarkable job with looking after the kids, and I think there's a lot of mums and dads out there who have unfortunately been at home with their kids, and it's been a challenging period, but they've done a great job just looking after their kids and looking after the family. So, and
just a couple of little things. I remember, we used to train down at Colindina, and I gave you a drive in the car coming back down to the caravan park, and I don't know. I'm thinking, you've played with a lot of players across the journey, not at Werribee, not just junior footy, but your experiences elsewhere. Who are some of your funny teammates that you've been involved with? This guy, we have to throw him under the bus here because he was supposed to be on my podcast last week and he pulled out. Aaron O'Callaghan, Azza, did he give you the name Sugar? And where did that come from? And is Azza one of the funny teammates that you've shared your footy with across the journey?
Yeah. There's been a lot of characters, mate, as you probably know. There's been probably a fair few down at Ocean Grove. Travis Gavin comes to mind. Sammy Fairway comes to mind. So some great characters, but like every club, mate, there's some really funny blokes and some really good fellas. Sugars, it pretty much come from nowhere. It did come from Ocean Grove. I think we're doing a boxing session one night, and the boys are on the pads. I can't remember who it was, and it wasn't very good. And I just said, "Boys, what are you doing? That's hopeless." So I think they got stuck into me. They say, "You get on the gloves," and I'm definitely no fighter or boxer or anything like that. And I think someone yelled out Sugar Ray Leonard or something like that when I was on the gloves, and it's pretty much stuck. And now I everywhere I go, I get Sugar, no matter where I go. Joey's and Bell Park, and still mates now. They're yelling it out. So it's it's stuck around for 10 years from one person yelling it out at Ocean Grove when I was doing boxing probably on a Tuesday night. So
What about when you get?
Funny.
What about when you get a cup? What about when you get a coffee from the coffee shop around the corner or near the ground or whatever? I'll just have one. Oh, actually, you could go to 2 sugars, couldn't you?
There's still a lot that yell out, mate. But it's stuck and no dramas in it.
Oh, well, good stuff. Like I said, I really appreciate your time, and I know it feels like it's been a bit of a lifetime ago, 2014, but you've had success in coaching and playing, and I think a lot of people forget that to play, be on a VFL list at Werribee is something that you can't take lightly, and I know that you love your sport, and I just quickly, I don't know, did you have any withdrawal symptoms last year with no footy on and coming back into this year? Did it really feel unique and think, I missed this?
A bit of a weird feeling. There were times, I'd be honest, where I'm thinking, mate, like maybe this wasn't like I've been involved with footy for 30 years now. And but then when I got back to training for a week, I got home and said to the wife, I said, nah, sorry, I'm back in love with it. Just seeing everyone again and the report with the players and stuff. So that's still the best thing that I love getting out of it is even over this last week when we haven't been down there, I can't wait to get back down there next week and just a report that you have with the players and the other coaches and the officials and just everyone around the club. So it's that's the biggest thing that I'd miss if I ever stopped.
Well, Shane Jack, thank you for joining us on episode 60. We're running into our Series 3 finale between now and the end of June. We're going to have someone on from a sports club. We're going to have an Olympian on. We're also going to have someone else who's another football coach between now and the end of June. Don't forget our business edition as well. But thanks for joining us on episode 60 of the Stoned Heen View podcast.
Thanks very much, mate. Great stuff.
Good stuff. That was Shane Jack, and Shane Jack has joined us on episode 60 of the Stoned Heen View podcast. You can remember that you can get in contact with a guest from anytime on sport if you've got a suggestion about Stoned Heen View. Stoned Heen View is also on Facebook. Type it into Facebook. We're on Instagram, our IGTV. If you've got a recommendation on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcasts, you can write us a review. Please write us a review. We're on Spotify, and our launching platform is Podbean. So that's where the episode's going to go first. And we've also got a YouTube channel and a Twitter account at Stoned Heen View. So until next time, we thank Shane Jack, the Bell Park Football Club senior coach, for joining us on the Stoned Heen View podcast, where we'll be back next week with another football coach talking about COVID and the implications and what's happened with the lockdown 4.0 across Victoria. And we'll see you soon on the Stoned Heen View podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.